Sydney last weekend was the host to a significant conference, or what should be a significant conference, under the acronym of CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. I spoke in some detail to identify solutions to the simple truth worrying Conservative people that there are Labor governments all over Australia. But you can't solve the problem, I said, with Labor leaning heavily to the left. And I stress what's happening to our kids in schools, indoctrination, not education. You can't address that problem, let alone overcome it, if you are politically blind to what the problem is. The Liberal Party will have to win 18 seats for the next federal election. No one talks about that reality, but they do say in a spirit of defeatism that, the vote for the Teals and the Albanese victory at the last election means that climate change is not the issue, it's the only issue. That is rubbish. And I'll address that separately. The fact is that the Teals, whatever their votes, don't represent the majority of Australians, and the Albanese mandate, as I've said often, comes from 32% of those who voted. So the overwhelming majority of Australians are looking for a political home not occupied by the Teals or by Labor. Can the Coalition provide that home? Well, not if you avoid the facts. When the much maligned Tony Abbott, and he rarely is consulted about electoral strategy, when Abbott won a landslide victory in 2013, having won in 2 elections 25 seats from Labor, there was a reason. Abbott was never Labor-light. Abbott argued traditional Liberal political positions. They weren't right-wing positions, they were traditional Liberal positions. As a result, the Coalition primary vote in 2013 was 45.5%. Primary vote. Not two-party preferred. Turnbull and Morrison, lurching to the left, supported by the Wets, who are still there, took the 45% in 2013 to 35.7% at the last election, a 10% slide. But believe the left-wing media, and they'll tell you that we face a new dominance from Labor and the Greens and the Teals. Well, they might have improved their numbers, but in terms of the voting population of 17.2 million at the last election, the Greens and Labor together only increased their vote by 337,000, or 1.7% of the voting population. So as I pointed out to this conference at the weekend, the first lesson for the Liberal Party is that Australia did not move dramatically to the left on May 21, but the Coalition was hammered. Can someone, therefore, in the Coalition answer a simple question? Why has the Coalition vote dropped at every election since Tony Abbott's landslide in 2013 as the Liberals move further to the left? I said on Saturday that one of the metaphors of this collapse was the former Treasurer of Frydenberg. In 2016, his primary vote in the seat of Kooyong, not two-party preferred, his primary vote, Frydenberg, 58.22%. By 2019, it crashed to 49.41%. And then, in a blue-ribbon Liberal seat of Kooyong, embracing the Morrison philosophy and policies, on May 21 last year, the Frydenberg vote was 42.98%. In 2 elections, a drop of 16%. But even with a sea of red across Australia, the Liberals, led by the Noes, by the Wets, the Simon Birminghams of this world, don't want to learn the lessons. Well, here's one. Since Tony Abbott returned the Coalition to power in 2013, the Coalition has lost 650,000 votes. Do you think that's got something to do with the constant harbouring by the Liberal Party of left-wingers like Turnbull and Matthew Keane? I'll come to Keane in a moment. Do you think it's got something to do with the Coalition after repeatedly telling us that they are the better economic managers, and historically they have been, but then they spend during coronavirus like drunken sailors and plunge us into unimaginable debt? How then do we criticise Labor's big spending philosophy and ignoring the issue of debt? I alone last year, well, not quite alone, Mark Latham was also in the vanguard of this, analysing the New South Wales budget, Liberal, Perrottet Keane, a $27 billion spending spree. Annual expenditure growth, let me stress expenditure growth of 26.5%. How in anybody's name does this sit with Liberal or Conservative values? Net debt of $115 billion, fiscal carnage. I've made mention many times of the Whitlam government on this front. Gough Whitlam was excoriated in 1974. It was a joke in the boardrooms of the nation that because of the 1974 budget, the Whitlam government knew nothing about managing the economy. That's what they said. It was a joke that they'd increased government spending in 1 year by 24.7%, a record people thought would never be broken. Well, it was broken by a Liberal government in New South Wales last year. Not Gough Whitlam's 24.7% increase, but 26.5%. If this doesn't mean the Liberal Party has lost its way, what does? And so we had the headlines of yesterday that the Keane budget last year and the so-called policy measures in the spend-a-thon are costing the new Minns government, as it tries to manage the economy, $25 million a day. No Liberal government worth its salt should tolerate this abandonment of economic responsibility and Liberal philosophy. Keane, the biggest spending treasurer in 40 years. But not one person in the media pointed this out. Mark Latham and I were alone in condemning it. Yet here in New South Wales, taxpayers now, as a result, forking out $25 million more a day. A lot of these proposals might have merit, but you're dealing with other people's money here, taxpayers' money. And I'd suggest to you that the people in charge of the Liberal government knew as much about managing the economy as did Gough and his mob. But the left were clapping their hands. We were playing into their hands. The Liberals in Canberra and in Sydney, hopeless in Queensland under the then Frecklington leadership, non-existent in Victoria under Matthew Guy, the Liberals blew themselves up. The tragedy is they don't seem to know why. Tell them why, and you're a conspiracist or an alarmist or an extremist or a modern-day troglodyte, basically someone who's ignorant and old-fashioned. I'm none of them. I'm just a realist. The Liberals have to understand that this is all happening under their very nose. We go back to Abbott. How did he win 25 seats? Simple messages. The Coalition's messages today, if they want to recover political ground and win 18 seats, must first be to get rid of the Birminghams of this world. The Wets should not be determining policy. Then say of The Voice, for example, I don't want detail. I won't accept race-based changes to the Constitution. Simple. On energy policy, just simply say we're not going over the cliff with Bowen. It's an economic suicide note based on hysteria and renewable nonsense. Chalmers and Co will trot out the rhetoric of increased productivity. Well, you'll never get it with the current energy policy. A nation will be productive when its costs are low. The Bowen policy, backed by many in the Liberal Party, are taking us down a high-cost, low-productivity road to ruin. We are heading for the poorhouse while ever we demonise the strength of our natural resources. Have a look at your screen. Today, this ad appeared in newspapers of an energy climate summit called Crunch Time for the Transition. Look at them all. The federal government are there, the Victorian government are there, corporate Australia, they're all there. Have a look at them. They're taking us on the path to energy poverty. Now, you can stand back and let it happen, or you can make your opposition heard. But there's a reason the Coalition vote has sunk from 45.5% under Abbott to 35.7% in May last year. It's called simply policy. The public are not stupid. They just don't think the Coalition are talking their language. And certainly this crowd at a so-called energy climate summit, they most certainly aren't.